Customer experience has evolved far beyond service scores. It's now a company-wide mission to create unforgettable brand moments. With 79% of companies prioritizing CX this year, how are you planning to stay ahead? Because the stakes are high, right? CX leaders face a gauntlet of challenges: evolving customer expectations, AI uncertainties, budget constraints, complex technical ecosystems. Ignoring any of these hurdles means falling behind while competitors surge ahead. Is today's reality? Mastering your digital platforms is not optional. It's essential for survival. And the solution? A comprehensive approach to managing your entire digital ecosystem. By taking charge of your core systems, you can streamline CX, eliminate inefficiencies, and empower your teams to deliver exceptional experiences. We're diving into Priority 1 from WWT's latest customer experience priorities research. Take control of your core digital platforms and systems. This foundational priority sets the stage for everything that follows. In fact, here's some key questions we're going to answer. How can CX leaders better manage their digital platforms? How does this approach boost customer satisfaction and business outcomes? And how do we navigate AI concerns, budget issues, and tech overload? Joining us to help address this and more, Andrew Brydon, a tech veteran with decades of software solution expertise, and Dave Watts, a digital strategist who's transformed CX across public and private sectors. These are today's guides, promising actionable steps that you can take right away. My name is Rob Boyd. Welcome to Worldwide Technology Presents Research, with insights powered by the Advanced Technology Center.
WWT presents Research.
Andrew, let's start with you and introductions. What is your role with Worldwide Technology, especially as it relates to today's discussion?
Sure. Been at WWT about 10 years, and I think almost every year I've been at WWT, I've been in a different role. But these days I am Executive Director of Technology within our digital group. Fairly broad description, but in practice get to work with some of what I think are our most interesting clients around digital strategy, digital transformation, all the way to implementation. And love being able to live through that whole life cycle. In practice, my team is a group of fantastic architects, digital technologists, creative technologists, tech consultants, and of course get to work closely with a whole range of different people across WWT and on the client side.
Perfect. So you are interfacing directly with clients in your role and then working with a team that is doing that at various degrees and levels, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for a long time, I was working with single clients. These days, I tend to operate more as an executive sponsor over some of our larger programs. So really enjoy that aspect of the job, get to meet some wonderful people, and really feel really close to our clients, which is a great place to be. Really enjoy working with all of them.
Excellent. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Well, Dave, how about you?
Sure. Thanks, Rob, and happy to be here. Dave Watts, digital advisor here, and I'm part of a strategic advisory team that we spend a lot of our time on the front lines with our sales teams, interacting with clients. I like to say at the tip of the spear, and get involved in, like Andrew, in a lot of different clients. And my number one focus and my team's number one focus is to partner with our clients and our internal teams to ensure that the business outcome that we are trying to solve for or solution for, however you want to say it, is our top priority, our main focus. So not coming in, we don't want to come in immediately in my role anyway and pitch a solution right out of the gate. Let's make sure we understand what it is that the client is trying to do, where we can help them, and we ask a lot of questions. Probably the main question I ask all the time is why. Why do you want to do something that you are talking to us about right now, and how can we help you? And then I'll partner with folks like Andrew and his team to some degree, and bring that opportunity to them to then kind of help round it out and what it might look like at the end of the day.
Well, I can tell you guys are going to have some good perspectives on this. Obviously, the research report that we're focused on is customer experience priorities. There's generally an annual report in a couple of key areas, customer experience being a huge one. And for this year, I wonder, just because things keep changing and they seem to be changing more rapidly than they have in the past. Andrew, I wonder if you could kick us off and kind of kind of explain what is meant by customer experience in today's digital landscape.
To me, again, we want to generalize. It seems obvious that, hey, we have customers. What experience do they have? And I think the simplest definition of that is about screens and moving through technology. But I think there's a much broader definition of that. Like, what is that entire interaction between the customer's experience, not just in any piece of technology, but really their whole experience with the company and operation. And, we can broaden that to patient experience. And I think often when we're thinking about customer experience, it includes employee experience as well. If the employees are happy, the customers have a much better chance of being happy. If the employees are unhappy, and we've all been in that situation, you'll know about it pretty quickly.
It's almost like you've read the priority report, since that's, I believe, number 4. We're going to focus on number 1. Not that it's not a valid point by any means, because we can talk about anything you want to.
It's hard for us in these types of things to separate, that employee and that customer experience at times, and understanding it, from the customer experience side, and things that we're seeing and I'm seeing. Yes, it's changing and evolving rapidly, and I've been doing this for a long time. I won't tell you how long, but a long time, and it's one of those things where, anytime a new technology comes out or a new product or a new tool, it's like, let's hurry up and implement and let's do it. And I think it's really important for our clients and our customers to take a step back and think about, like, what are we trying to get out of this from an experience standpoint, and where are we trying to make an impact. And I think you're seeing things like AI is obviously a hot topic that I don't think I go a day without being in 2 or 3 meetings where that is discussed, and rightfully so. But it's like, how are we personalization, hyper personalization now, like what are we doing with that, or what are you doing as an organization with that, and taking it to a point where you're not just you're anticipating with AI now, you're anticipating what your customer or consumer is looking to do, as opposed to just making a website or a mobile app look nice on the screen in front of you, which is still important. But what else is there as you go deeper?
When you look at the pace of change when it comes to what customers expect out of the people or organizations they interact with, versus where organizations feel like they're progressing in terms of being able to meet those expectations, how well do those things match up?
I mean, I think the typical consulting answer is it depends, or who knows. But I think I don't think that it's totally different or totally like off pace, at least in the experiences that I'm having. I think you'll and it depends on the level of who you're speaking with too, or the industry that you're in as well. Some industries are much more hyper vigilant about being at the forefront of the experience and the technology and how they're interacting with their end users. Others are a little slower to adapt and adopt, and that's okay. It's just kind of where you fall in that spectrum, I think, and again, the technologies definitely are a big player in that part.
Do you agree, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I might add a little color to that. I think it's been fascinating for me to watch kind of the evolution of this, and I think there are these. I like watching running races, and you see the people who charge out in front. And they're like, wow, they're fantastic. They're so fast. But, to use that analogy, this is a marathon. And so we see brands that have had these fantastic user experiences. And I'd probably call out Starbucks as one, where a few years ago it was like, wow, they're doing all these great things in their digital app and really thinking as a digital first company. And now I think they're realizing that, hey, we kind of treated that like a one-off investment, not a continual thing that you have to keep investing in, because the bar is moving so quickly. So while it was great that you could do stored value and points at Starbucks a few years ago, now it's looking pretty tired, and it's becoming problematic for their business, the way that interaction happens. There are other brands that have sort of come from nowhere and all of a sudden become the next generation of leaders, often with less features, just getting a few features right versus trying to do everything and do it so-so. So, as a spectator sport, if you really want to sit back and look at customer experience, I think it's great. It's really interesting what people are doing. There's still a huge amount of innovation. I call our patient experience as ultimately really customer experience, where medical was sort of renowned for technology that was behind. And because of, I think, some of the large systems, some of the legislation, like a lot of the big medical providers are really upping their game in terms of what they're providing to their patients, which is great to see. It's nice for an industry that kind of existed in the mainframe world and, we'll send you a paper printout. I think the last few years has been really transformational. So, but it depends. There's still a lot of medical providers that are struggling with this. So, at the end of the day, yes, to Dave's answer, it's all over the place, but I think there's some really interesting examples in there.
It's a fine line too, because you want, and we've probably all experienced this because we are consumers of a lot of these experiences, right, in our day-to-day lives, not just in our professional lives. And you work with a bunch of different doctors, for example, or hospitals that you've worked with as individually. Every experience can be a little bit different. And you'll get the automated text saying check in for your appointment now, which is, relatively, I don't want to call it new, but it's getting better. It's getting better, right? But then you have to, and I just did this recently, which is why this came to top of mind, 3 different click-throughs, and then I got to go log on to my laptop to get this all finalized and stuff. Like, that's not like that. There's an improvement there that needs to be done. And others, again, and that kind of goes back to what I said earlier, like everybody's just trying it because they know they have to do it, and not everybody gets it right all the time or out of the gate at first try, but it's something that can always be improved upon.
Well, and that's obviously something we want this report to help people with, as far as well as kind of introducing and exposing both the why questions, what should be asked and answered, where do you go for help, how do you, where do you even begin to phrase some of these things. Specifically to the heart of our discussion today, priority 1 from the report is where we're focused, and it's all about empowering organizations to take the reins, I like this, of their digital destiny through a full stack of, that's not big words. What's a full stack approach to customer experience. Andrew, I wonder if you could break down what's meant by taking control of your digital destiny. It doesn't have to be the answer necessarily given specifically in the paper, but from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a philosophical answer to this, but I'll start with the pragmatic. I mean, in very real terms, and I think, again, patient experience is a good example where there's a couple of big providers and really organizations that are beholden to where those providers are going. They're providing the patient-facing software, they're providing the back-end systems, and really putting a lot of constraints around what people can do. And I think the smartest people, it's easy to call this owning your full stack, but that's not really what we mean. What we mean is you're not going to rewrite the entire universe of medical software, but there is an opportunity, whether it's medical, whether it's retail, whether it's other industries, to really figure out what are the important bits here, what are the bits that your customers really care about that can be a differentiator. And I think that's different for everyone. It might be attached to the pane of glass. It might be the look and feel of what you're doing as a real differentiator. It could be all the way on the back end around reliability and resiliency for systems that aren't used to being reliable and stable. In some industries, that's kind of expected that, right, hey, this app doesn't work great all the time. Or it could be deep in the data. So we talk about AI. Ultimately, that's a data science. It's great to have a wonderful user experience, to have one click to get things into your basket. It doesn't matter if you can't actually purchase the thing because the inventory system in the background doesn't understand that. So I think it's easy to think of customer experience as the thing they're staring at in front of them. But I think this is what's fascinating, is that experience is just getting deeper and deeper. So now it's not just about the server sitting behind the website. Right. It's about 3 or 4 systems deep back out to the AI, the planning, the staffing. It's no good ordering food online if there's no one there to cook it. So that system that does staff management all of a sudden becomes an implicit part of that customer experience, even though traditionally that's not what we're thinking about. I think that's what makes these systems so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, I'm curious, do you think there's a difference in kind of the traditional approach to CX versus what is maybe necessary to achieve certain things today as we've become so much more digital and interconnected?
I can't believe I've gotten into this conversation this far and haven't brought this up, but having a shared vision within your organization from a CX perspective, and I think that we're seeing more and more of that. Like, if you've gone back several years ago, it was the business side had, here's what we want to do, but didn't get the buy-in or wasn't aligned across the broader organization. And more and more, the maturity of organizations that in this space that we interact with on a regular basis has definitely increased and gotten much more um, aligned in that area, but it's still a challenge. And making sure that there's a shared vision from a CX perspective across your organization is really important. And which means I don't think it's ever been more important for our business folks and our IT folks to be aligned. And I say that here in front of you, and I know it's probably a common theme. I've been in the consulting business for, like I said earlier, a long time, and I talked about it when I started many, many, many years ago, and I'm still talking about it now. Is that having that alignment between both sides of the organization is crucial for success in this area.
And to validate that point, I would say that, and I've done shows around these topics many different ways for Worldwide Technology for 4 years. I don't think there's been a single show where there hasn't been a consistent thread somewhere about breaking down organizational silos and communicating in areas that we've not historically been good at communicating, because we speak different languages, we're managed differently, whatever. It just becomes so much more important, as you say, to kind of unify this. And in fact, we're talking about that with the full stack approach, being something that says you need to make decisions about the systems that you're going to do in-house because you've got something unique and distinctive and it's worth that investment, and you can define the outcomes and it aligns with your vision. But there are going to be things that you need to farm out, that you need to use third parties. But what is your strategy for how you're making that work together in a more unified full stack approach, just to start mashing all words together?
Yep.
So the report lays out a roadmap for organizations that are looking to implement kind of that full step approach. And there's 4 critical steps. And these are always kind of my favorite in these reports. Let's start with this first step, assessing critical systems and data assets. Andrew, I'm kind of curious, what are some common pitfalls organizations might run into with regards to assessing their critical systems? How do you go about doing that?
Often the problem we see is the organization has driven the current assets. So it's completely expected that we go into organizations and discover people have bought a pile of software that they might not even be using, or they've bought 3 different versions of software that does the same thing because each department has bought its own. So I think just in really practical terms, it's like, all right, let's get on the same side of the table. Let's act like one team, and let's figure out what we have here now. And you mentioned systems, and I love that you called out data, because data is even more notorious for this. Wouldn't name the client to protect the guilty, but had this conversation this week about, they come to us and they're like, well, we want to build this data repository and we want to put a web page in front of it. And, the conversation goes on for a while, and it's like, hey, that system you're pulling the data from is built for exactly that. And at the end of the day, the answer is, well, we're not allowed to change that system. We know it's a system that does exactly what we want, but essentially we're duplicating the data and building another version of that product because that's the thing we're allowed to control.
So they're working around their own organizational issues.
Yeah. And,
wow. Yeah,
I can see that. It's endemic that, you look at the software stack and you can almost map backwards to how the organization is laid out. Yeah, it's like, look at this software. Well, guaranteed that's owned by the marketing department. Look at this software that's owned by the business operation department. And I think the most successful clients we've worked with really do operate as a single entity to say, okay, if the goal is to figure out what we have, let's not figure out if it's your data store or my data store. And it doesn't mean everything has to live in one place, but you need to figure out what that data is and how many copies of this thing it makes sense to have from the overall business outcome, not from each department should have its own copy of that just in case. That's honestly kind of an interesting and a fun process because usually you get to meet with different departments and discover you know more about the other bits of software in their organization than they do. So you get to go to marketing and go, by the way, do you know IT has a whole system that does that? And they go, what do you mean? I've been for 2 years trying to get a system that does that. Well, your organization already has one. And so that's kind of a freeing process to be able to go, you know what, this problem is solvable and maybe you don't have to wait another 2 years to get there.
Yeah. I always feel like employees at the tip of the spear there, they are the ones that generally know exactly where these things aren't working the way they should, because they're the ones tasked with just figuring out how to execute given the tools that they've been provided without much power to maybe change those tools in the back end systems.
Not only will these individual internal departments own some of this software, this technology, this data, in a lot of cases too, you're partnering with outside third-party vendors or other organizations that, you know, you've bought a product from that is controlling that too. So then you have that also coming into play that makes things can make things a little more complex and challenging. And in some cases that's necessary and fine. And I mean, we see it all day long, every day, but it's also just adds another layer and another player in the whole ecosystem that you have to take into consideration.
Which, as we go to step number 2, I think it becomes more difficult to pull off, which is around prioritizing security and compliance. I mean, how should we approach data privacy and compliance and with systems, some being in-house, some being external?
It's important. How important? It's really important. And I think instead of like how we do it, it's like, well, why is that important? As you know, putting your business owner hat on, like, why is it important? Why do I need to be concerned about data privacy? And it sounds obvious, but it's something that has to be, it has to be part of the conversation. And I'm thinking back earlier in my career too, like it was always about, you know, let's design this thing, let's make this thing work, let's, you know, fix this process. You know, somebody else will worry about security. And even, you know, going back years and years and years ago or to earlier in our careers, like it wasn't something I know it was there. It wasn't as prevalent as it is today. And that, and rightfully so, because of the amount of data that is being collected across the board. And so I think, you know, and key here is, you know, organizations and building and maintaining trust with their consumers is paramount, especially when you're talking about some of the big brands that we deal with, and maintaining that trust. And how do you lose that trust? You don't have the proper secure data security and compliance measures in place, and you have a breach, you have a hack, you have, you know, some data that got leaked out and stolen, and so that just immediately deteriorates that brand trust, and then that hits your bottom line. And I think that, you know, I saw a stat somewhere, and I don't remember, so I can't footnote it anywhere here, but like 90% of consumers feel more comfortable in brands that are actually protecting their data effectively, and 70% of consumers will not go back if they did find something out, or there was a breach, or there was some issue, that they're done with that brand. In a lot of cases, that's a big number, 70%. And so that's something that I think is just maintaining and protecting that trust and that brand reputation is paramount.
My mindset is, hey, this is a technical problem that's easy to solve. I think where I try and have empathy with our business partners is
just get rid of the people. It'll be a lot easier. Yeah.
You know, it's hard to explain the business value of this until something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I understand, I'm buying this product. You know, I can use this product. It'll make me this much money. It's a fairly easy calculation to make, at least at a rough level. It's hard to explain to people that, you know what, if you're not thinking about security in that equation, now we're talking about the chances. Well, there's a 90% chance that's not a problem and it didn't cost you anything. And there's a 10% chance that that's a very, very bad problem that you don't want to have to deal with. So now you've gone from a fairly simple to explain, I can draw this on the whiteboard equation, to now I've got a risk analysis about what am I prepared to take on versus not prepared to take on. And that's a much more difficult thing to explain. And I don't think technologists have been good about thinking about things that way. You know, we tend to, I come from a world of estimating, you know, how long is it going to take to build that feature? That's an easy one to explain. It's a lot harder to explain how long is it going to build to take to build that feature with a 99% chance that we don't have a security problem.
Right.
Because I can't give you 100, but I can give you a sliding scale. So I think we have to build that nuance of the conversation into these things. And it takes time and it takes planning.
Well, I think the good thing is, in my experience, I think things have slowly started changing over time, at least from my perspective, where a lot of organizations that I've been working with have historically viewed security as an expense to be minimized versus a department that you cooperate with from the very beginning so that these things aren't as arduous and reactive as they are going to be naturally if you don't do anything about it. Yeah.
In my experience, bring in your security and data privacy teams early and often, whether that's internally or if you're working with another partner. Having that input is imperative. And and I've been in case I've worked with different clients where they've said, all right, well, or we've come back to them and said, well, what level of risk are you willing to accept here if you don't do you don't do X and Y, but you just do Z. Are you willing to do that? I mean, and that's often board level conversations, right? Depending on what type of data we're looking at.
Do you accept these trade-offs? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's perfect. And just keeping us moving forward here, number 3 is around evaluating your organization's readiness for this. I'll jump back to you, Andrew. What needs to be considered when you're talking about readiness for bringing core systems in-house, I guess, would be one angle I'd want to consider.
Yeah, I mean, it's a serious commitment. And I think this is where we spend a lot of our time. So, I come from an agile software background where planning sort of for a while became a bit of a dirty word. But I think, as we've got to these larger systems and we've already talked a little about security, compliance, you really want to plan for those things. You can't agile your way into compliance. Yeah. And I think there's a whole world of other things around this, like long-term operational costs. What is the team that I need to build this thing? What is the team that I need to run this thing? Who else am I going to have to get on board? No matter how much we might say, hey, we want to own the full stack, chances are there's half a dozen other vendors that live in this universe of software products you're working in. Hardware vendors, other big software vendors, security software, compliance. Are we ready for those interactions? Do we have it at a practical relationship level? Do we have it at a contractual level? Are we ready to go on this thing? And then do we really understand what we're committing to? Yeah. Again, back to that earlier example of this is very rarely a one and done endeavor. So if I'm like, hey, I'm going to bring my e-com in-house, you better not say, hey, that's going to cost me X dollars. And then after that, I'm done and I walk away. You're going to need a team that really owns that because it's an evolving product. Because even if your competitors are using the COTS option for that, they've got a product team behind it. They're upgrading features and expectations are changing, way more quickly. So just to call out, the thing of the day, AI. If you've built your product and you thought you were done last year, well, surprise, the whole tech world changed. And now all anyone wants to talk about is AI. Are you ready for that? So really that sort of strategic planning. Data governance is a huge one. We've already talked about the security implications of that, but there are so many other levels at which you want to be thinking about data governance for anything you're doing. And I mean, it's easy to think about this from a build your own perspective, but I think exactly same thing's true from a system integration perspective. Yeah. It's like, oh, we don't have to worry about this. We buy all our components. Well, really, did they work together? Oh, no, we've got a ton of code that glues this thing together. Well, guess what? You have a custom system now. So very few people live on either extreme. And I think it's navigating those waters in the middle that's, the big challenge that's out there.
Boy, and this whole fear, this thing I have of where we use cloud-based systems or SaaS based offerings and then stop asking all the important questions about, well, where are you storing my data? And, what are the governance rules? Do they differ from the ones that I know either as important to me as an industry or just important to me as, part of our intellectual property, perhaps? Mm-hmm. Number 4, this last one on the steps talks about unifying data for AI and for insights. And you mentioned the importance of data, but I'm curious, what are the biggest obstacles? And I'll start with you, Dave. What do you think are kind of the biggest obstacles for unifying data across an organization?
Well, I think I mean, I might actually go back a little bit to what we talked about on the organizational readiness side, it just as a lead into this, because and everything Andrew said is I 100% agree with, and that doesn't happen all
That never
the
happens.
time.
Wow, I'm just glad I could be here to witness it. Yeah.
But having your internal resources, it kind of goes. I mean, unifying your data. Yeah, there's a technology aspect to that, of course. But do you have the right resources in order to do that and to manage that data and to take those necessary steps internally? Because that impacts those folks. Do you need to bring in? Do you need to hire? Like, do you have the budget for that? So the success of a full stack approach really relies on having the right infrastructure in place too. That also includes what you're doing with your data, where you're storing it, how you're using it, who has access to it. And so, I think it's, again, I'm kind of talking on question 3 a little bit, but it is crucial to make sure that you are ready that you look at yourself internally and really do that full on, hey, are we prepared to take on this task? And then the task is, hey, how are we unifying our data and to get to our digital destiny? I've never used that phrase before in my life, but I'm sticking with the resource thing, like having the right team, the right people in place that can make the right decisions, that can monitor and maintain, that are stewards, if you will, of those data decisions that are being made across the organization.
I think we generally have historically thought about data as being kind of part of an application or part of a tool set or something. And here it sounds like when you start recognizing the power of the data and as an organization, you want to think of your data, it sounds like, as something holistic and independent of itself, regardless of how it's maybe being used, so that you're both protecting it as well as making it available and able to monitor it and kind of work with it in a more pragmatic manner, perhaps.
I do think ultimately, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but data is currency for most companies. And so there's a little bit of a tension. And if we get back to this question of what do I own, what do I rent, a lot of these third-party services that people are using, inherently, they're using that same currency as well. They want to collect your data. You're storing their data of who bought what. And their currency is the fact that they can do that for a lot of different companies and combine that stuff together. So even though they're providing a service, they're not super motivated to give that data back. And so I think the first part of this conversation is, which data do I need to own? If I think of data as the currency and not services, I've sort of got this tension with these people who are providing often really good scalable solutions, SaaS solutions in the cloud. I don't have to worry about them. I don't have to hire people to take care of them. But I'm also giving them something that I might not be thinking about, which is I'm giving them my data, and they might not be excited to give that back. To take a very practical example, because we work in this space quite a bit, quick serve restaurant, all of them rely on third-party delivery services. Those delivery services would love if the restaurants they were delivering for didn't have logos and didn't have names. Like, it's very much in their interest to debrand their customers. And you just go to their site, you say, I want to buy a hamburger, and then Grubhub will pick the hamburger for you and deliver it to your house. They want the marketing data. They want to know. I mean, I don't know, a lot of us have seen these push notifications. It's like, man, it's Tuesday night. How does it know that I always buy takeout on Tuesday night because I'm too lazy to cook? Like, they have a lot of data about me. Those individual brands are providing that. And so I think when you start about thinking about data, what data is valuable to my business should be that first question.
Yeah. And are you not giving away that value to someone else who's getting more benefit from it than you are, which makes no sense.
And some of it you can say that's a fair trade-off. I don't care about that data. It's not critical to my business. But, before you even start about thinking which data store am I going to put this in, what are my most valuable data assets? And I think AI has really driven that point home because all of a sudden AI is driven by data. So then people are like, well, I don't even own the data that I want to have AI figure out.
How do you measure success in this area? Because it feels like it's not something you're ever going to be done with. But I don't know, measures of success. Dave, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think the obvious ones are, what's your return on investment? Are you getting, by implementing a full stack approach, what is your long-term outlook? Is this going to make more money for you
Yeah.
as an organization? Or I think, what your revenue looks like. I think also um, looking internally within an organization too, like putting metrics on, because what implementing a full stack approach does do, one of the benefits is, you in theory you have more smaller, more versatile, more dynamic teams working together. And so what is your time to market there too? So if you have a solution that in the past may have taken X amount of time and X amount of dollars, by implementing this new approach, or by kind of honing and rounding out your ecosystem, is that time to market sped up? And ideally,
Mm.
the answer would be yes. And
Yeah.
in most cases, in almost every case I've been involved in, that is the answer. And then kind of, I think the other one I'd say is just like, what is your, do you have, I'm assuming if you're in this space and you're talking about a full stack approach and of your digital ecosystem, do you have metrics on what your customer retention is, your loyalty products that maybe you may or may not have? Do you have those already? What changes when you do implement something like this? So I think those are just a few that come to mind that I've seen that have been very relevant to measure your success of implementing a full stack.
Yeah, Andrew, we've been talking CSAT scores and things for years, but it feels like there is a different level of granularity, and it's going to differ, I'm sure. But what are your thoughts on measuring success here?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with almost everything Dave said.
Ooh,
I think
I like that.
I'd probably have a different category, which is sort of leading indicators that aren't actually that metric of success,
Okay.
but the sort of smells you look for to tell you whether you're on the way. So I agree. Money ultimately is how we want to measure these things. I think there are proxies for that, like percentage digital share is a common one we see with people like, hey, I want to be at 50% digital. I would say time to market is a good example of a leading indicator rather than the actual metric. And I think there are some other similar things like, and you can measure this, like I'd say departmental alignment is a good leading indicator to be looking at. So I think we've talked a lot about how that's the thing we see that is a really good tell on whether organizations are going to be successful.
What would be an example of proof that that's happening versus, the leader of that department creating another PowerPoint to explain how well they've worked because that was on their goals for that year? I'm being a little cheesy there, but the point is, like, are there some verifiable ways to say, yeah, we've improved in interdepartmental communication, perhaps?
Yeah, I think you kind of hinted at this. The people on the front line know.
Yeah.
So I think it does come down to just asking those people on the ground, like, what are your goals? What are you striving for? Do they line up across departments? Because you're right, the departmental heads, they're smart people, they're successful. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. But, if Joe in the back office is saying, hey, what's the most important thing for our company next year? And he gives you a completely different answer to the person who's implementing something on the IT side, that's probably a pretty good sign that the company's not rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
And I think that is that leads into that time to market, because if you've got different groups working on different initiatives with no coordination, like if you ask the right people, you'll see that pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think it's all about setting up systems to even be able to ask those questions, I think. And that's maybe the outcome of this entire thing. Because the challenge of this show is that I'm asking two very smart gentlemen about very broad topics that are going to be very, very unique and different for everybody implementing them. But I think in general, we can all say that these are not easy things to solve, and it's not going to be one person, hey, you're in charge of this now, go improve CX and tell me what that would mean. But how does someone get started? I wonder if you guys could reflect a little bit on resources that WWT provides that you recommend for someone, maybe at various levels of commitment at this stage as they're watching this.
We have some really great experts internally at Worldwide and externally as well that we partner with that put together research reports like this one as an example that can just it touches on things at a certain level, but then it kind of can help you open the door into things like where we do a lot of customer briefings. We have a lot of conversations, especially in my role. I get pulled in way up front to have a conversation with a client about what are they trying to solve, and of course I'm asking why. and what is the outcome of what they want to do there? What does that look like? And just kind of help them talk through just to get an idea around what it is that they're trying to do. And then, then we can so that's kind of like an initial briefing, and like that is a very high level. We can go into deeper like workshops that are more, half day, full day type things. And so my suggestion and my I guess recommendation is just ask the questions. We're more than happy to always have a conversation with our clients about what it is that they're trying to do. We're not going to come in and immediately pitch a solution right out of the gate. We want to hear what you have to say, and then come back with a well-rounded response to that based on what we've heard from our conversation with you. Those are a couple things that I always strongly recommend.
It's not just about where you want to go. I think it's also where you are. So I think implicit in a lot of these conversations is whether you want to call it digital maturity or CX maturity. But, really having that conversation and an honest reflection on how mature are you in this space. We can give you the best in class. We know what that looks like. But if you're nowhere near that, that's not where you jump to. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of that first conversation is just, and again, you might not get the same answer from everyone. And, the IT department will tell you they're great at this, and the rest of the organization saying, no, actually, this is what we're terrible at. Yeah. That's a huge sign that you're not very mature in this path. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, that's sort of our early job. And, Dave has a lot of these conversations, but my team and me have a lot of these conversations too. Hey, help us understand where you are, because it's nice to know where you want to go, but we need to understand what the step is from here. Mm. If you can barely walk, there's not much good us trying to sell you the latest pair of running shoes.
Yeah. Well, I would almost say that you guys are there to also help them understand where they are. Because,
absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, how many times does someone confidently give you an answer and doesn't take but a few questions to realize that answer is not necessarily grounded, not that they're wrong and not that they're making anything up. It's just, it may not be. I feel like coming to an organization like WWT, when you are dealing with big, intractable problems that require multiple groups that don't normally talk together, you really do need a third party who has the resources to be able to pull in the expertise as that need is revealed. And but you got to reveal it, and it's hard to do that. And so you need someone who's got a little bit of distance on it and experience across a broader customer set to really, I think, make that happen. Here I go. I'm selling you guys again. Thank you so much. Andrew, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rob.
And Dave, thank you as well.
Thanks, Rob.
A full stack approach considers every layer of CX, from experiences with customer-facing engagement channels to back-end operations and all the orchestration that must happen in between. Great stuff from both Andrew and Dave. And as you well know, we've only scratched the surface of this complex and rapidly changing field. I encourage you to dive deeper by checking out the full customer experience priorities research paper. It's packed with actionable strategies and in-depth analysis that can help you take your organizational CX to the next level. As of this taping, there is one other video we are working on here with the research team focused on Priority 4. It's the same report, but with two different experts, Morgan LaVille and Brennis Stanford. They tackle questions around the benefits of empowering your employees as CX champions. It's a great complement to the insights that we've discussed today. Delivering exceptional customer experiences isn't just nice to have, it's essential for staying competitive and driving growth. Whether you're just starting your CX journey or looking to refine your approach, the insights in these reports and shows can help guide your way. Thanks for joining us on WWT Research. I'm Rob Boyd. We'll see you again next time.
This episode is brought to you by Okta. Go further with identity that streamlines user experiences, increases customer signups, improves workforce productivity, and gets apps to market faster.